Hi, do you know that it does not matter how many knobs are on your mixer or how many faders are there, no matter how intimidating the mixer is, whether it's an analog mixer or a digital mixer, what you need to know to conquer that mixer is your channel strip. So let's dive into the world of the channel strip. At the top of your channel strip, you would have gain or trim, which controls your preamp, the amount of amplification you can give the input signal, especially in situations where you have a mic level signal. You can use the preamp to power that signal to a level where you can actually make use of it very well. Beside the trim, there's usually a pad switch, and that applies mostly to line level signal which come in very hot. So when you pad, it drops that signal by 20 dB on some consoles, 18 dB on some consoles. So you see minus 18 or minus 20 depending on the designer of the mixer. After that, you have your inserts. Your inserts are a way to get signal out and back into the mixer, especially when you want to use an outboard effect serially. So for instance, maybe you have an outboard compressor that you want to apply to only your snare, for instance. You use your insert using a Y cable. So that Y cable goes into the insert port. One leg of it goes into the input of the effect, and the other leg goes back to the output of that effect. So that signal goes through that effect and come back into that channel strip before you continue your processing. There's another interesting use of the insert is the one click method, which I'll talk about in one of my next few videos, which you can kind of use as an auxiliary way of getting signal out and not back in. But that's not for today. Next, you have direct out. Depending on the manufacturer of the console, some consoles don't have direct out, but direct out is a way of getting a copy of your signal out of the mixer, maybe for multi-track recording, or you want to send it to another mixer so you can have like a dual mix. That happens. The modern version of that is USB recording now. So most mixers just have USB and you can just do your multi-track from USB. But traditionally, you still find direct out on some consoles. After that, you have your EQ section where you can clean up your signal and maybe tune it a bit to whatever sound that you really want to get out of that signal. And then you have your auxiliary sense or your buses. And just like the word bus, if you wanted to leave your house to your next destination, you take a bus. So the bus transports you from point A to point B, and that's just the concept. So you want to send that signal to some specific destinations, maybe your floor wedge, maybe your drummer's wedge, maybe some in-ear monitors. You use your buses to send them. Beside the bus, there's usually a switch that says pre, and on some consoles it says post. What does it mean? So if it's on pre-fader sense, that means that you can use those buses or those sense or those auxiliaries independent of what you are doing with your main PA, what you are doing with your faders. So the signal will go out to the destination even if the fader is not activated. However, if it's in post fader, then that means that the fader has to be activated for that signal to go out. And I'm going to emphasize this because this is a problem that church volunteers and newbie engineers face, where they feel like I have sent this thing to this boss, but there's no sound coming out. And they start troubleshooting, checking the speakers, checking the amps, and checking everything. And everything is right, but the signal is not coming out. And then maybe at some point, you know what they say, let me leave it and just face the PA. And the minute they push the fader, all of a sudden, that bus is working. So in that situation, that bus is in a post fader configuration. So it's depending on your fader before it works. And the thing is that if you make any change on your fader, it also affects the kind of signal that is going into that bus. More on that soon. After that, you have your effect section. Effect section is for your mostly time-based effects, reverb, and some other effects that you may want to use, especially on board effects. Now, the way most of these effects are designed, they're supposed to be parallel to your signal. So you send a copy of that signal to the effects, and you want them to be in post fader. And the reason is because imagine you have a reverb on a vocal, and then along the line, you decide to bring down the vocal in your PA. But because the effect is in a pre-fader configuration, when you bring out the signal of the vocal, the reverb is now more pronounced because the reverb has not changed. Even though you found the perfect blend between the reverb and the drive vocal, now that you have made a change and the change does not affect the reverb, everything changes. The reverb is now more, and now you have issues. So most of the time, your effects are always post fader, and we use your buses for them. After that, you would have your pan, which allows you to spread your signal across the stereo image. One good thing about panning is that it allows you to have a more distinct mix. So you can place different elements in different areas without them clashing with other instruments of similar um, frequency response or frequency makeup. After that, you have your faders, which are obviously there to control your main PA, your main sound system, your front of house, and whatever it is that you're using. Beside those faders, there are usually some switches. You see something like ST, you see something like 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, or even sub. So, what are those switches? Those switches are asking about where you want those faders to actually go, the destination of those faders. So, ST would mean that you are sending that fader to your main left and right directly. 1 to 2 would mean that 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and 5 to 6 would mean that you want to use a group. You want to use a VCA in analog mixers and DCA in digital mixers. So what those ones do is that they give you the chance to control a group of instruments as one. So for instance, your drum can have several elements, 3 snares, kick in, kick out, sub kick. That's already like 5. You can have snare top, snare bottom on each of those snares. That's like 6, and that's like 9. And you're still on snare and kick. And you can have your toms and overheads and all of that. And you may have like 17 channels for your drums alone. And then you find the perfect blend for the drums. And you think, yes, this is the blend I want. Now, maybe for some reason you now want to increase or attenuate that drum in the middle of your mix. You can't possibly be moving 17 faders accurately at the same time. And that is where your VCA makes sense. So just one fader controls the whole of your drums, and you can just use it to make that adjustment. Another practical example would be your background vocals. You can just have that perfect blend between all your BGVs, and with one fader, you can control how you want to use them. You don't even need a sophisticated mixer to achieve this. As long as the mixer has a VCA group, you are good to go. If you think this video helped you in any way, please, please, I'm begging, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next one.